Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the show today. My name is Spencer Walsh, and on today's show, we're talking about a growing rift between the special counsel and the attorney general, the mass protests underway in Venezuela, and a fatal shooting, tragically, at Charlotte, North Carolina, and a college campus there. We're going to get into a look at all that stuff and more on today's show. It's the Wake Up, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. My name is Spencer Walsh. All right, let's get into it. Robert Mueller, the special counsel, he wrote a very shocking letter to Attorney General William Barr in March, objecting to Barr's conclusions about the Mueller report. So this is in late March, just after he recently released the report. So, no, not when he released the report, when he released the letter. Objecting to his early description of the Russia investigation's conclusions that appeared to clear President Trump on the possible obstruction of justice, according to Justice Department and three people with direct knowledge of the communication between the two men. The letter adds to the growing evidence of a rift between them and is another sign of the anger among the special counsel's investigators about Barr's characterization of their findings, which allowed Trump to wrongly claim that he had been vindicated. But even though the quote literally directly from the report was that he had not been yet exonerated. So that is all very interesting and telling stuff. So now then again, the lately redacted report has been released. All that stuff's been kind of cleared up, but it's very interesting and speaks very poorly of Mr. Barr that he would come out, obviously, and lie about this. And I think it's also very interesting that he tried to at least somewhat stifle the letter. It's unclear what specific objections Mueller raised in the letter. The Justice Department spokeswoman said on Tuesday evening that he expressed a frustration over the lack of context in Mr. Barr's presentation of his findings on obstruction of justice. Barr defended his descriptions of the investigation's conclusions in conversations with Mueller over the days he sent the letter, according to two people with knowledge of their discussion. So apparently they kind of went back and forth from what it seems on specifically, I would assume, obstruction of justice, because if you remember, what Barr would say is, oh no, I think he's cleared of obstruction of justice based on so-and-so legal proceedings, and it's really unclear what, like, the details of what he used there to say that Trump should be cleared, but Mueller obviously had a different story. He said it'll be up for Congress to decide. That's kind of what he wanted to have happen there with his investigation, but obviously Barr saw it differently. Mueller saw it differently, but it would be Barr saw it differently. Excuse me. Anyway, so that's going to be very interesting because what happens now is, again, of course, people who on Twitter had the little fight, they'd be like, oh, well, did he misrepresent it? Did he not? Well, yes, he did, obviously, but it doesn't really matter because he did end up releasing the full report. Nothing really that bad was in the full report that would really hang him up. Like in terms of collusion, obviously, but obstruction of justice is going to be a whole other scenario that he really misrepresented. So in the end, the truth came out. That's the important thing to remember. But it really looks bad that William Barr is going to misrepresent this and shade this up a little bit. A central issue in the simmering dispute is how the public's understanding of the Mueller report has been shaped since the special counsel ended his investigation and delivered his 448-page report on March 22nd to the Attorney General, his boss and longtime friend. The 4-page letter that Barr sent to Congress 2 days later gave the little detail about the special counsel's findings and created the impression that Mueller's team found no wrongdoing, allowing Trump to declare that he had been completely exonerated. But when Mueller's report was released on April 18th, it painted a far more damning picture of the president and showed that Mueller believed that significant evidence existed that Trump obstructed justice. The special counsel emphasized that nothing in the Attorney General's March 24th letter was inaccurate or misleading. The Justice Department spokeswoman Carrie Kupek said, and that was probably that was probably something that he may want to dispute. Something that Mueller may want to dispute at this point. But over the past month, other signs of friction between the Attorney General and the special counsel have emerged over issues like legal theories and constitutional protections afforded to presidents to do their job and how Mueller's team conducted the investigation. So yeah, a lot of legal disputes, a lot of things that have kind of been airing on that side, which I thought to be quite interesting about how there was that kind of backdrop, that kind of issue, that kind of continuing back and forth with the Mueller and Barr kind of just talking shop almost about legal issues. And what would happen here is, I think it'd be very interesting to see how Congress reacts to it. And yeah, again, it all kind of comes down to Congress, what they're going to do with obstruction of justice charge, which, by the way, in the end, we did fully find out about the fact how much and to what degree, really, that Trump did obstruct justice. So that's all very interesting stuff. And so he's going to really need to, or Congress, people like Nancy Pelosi, Cummings, Schiff, they're all going to need to decide how far they want to go in that, and if it's worth it, really, to pursue something to that degree. So, yeah. And also, interestingly, Barr is scheduled to testify for the Senate Judiciary Committee at 10 a.m. Eastern, and Jerry Nadler, by the way, has already demanded that letter by that time. So that'll be interesting to watch. We'll cover that, obviously, for you as time continues. All right. The opposition leader Juan Guaido has called for a peaceful rebellion today after urging Venezuelans and the country's military to rise up against President Nicolas Maduro. So that's very interesting. Looks like they're finally starting, after literally months of just screwing things up time and time again. They're finally going to try and do this coup thing in Venezuela at this point. So on Tuesday, thousands of anti-government demonstrators clashed with forces allied to Maduro. At least 69 people were wounded. The Trump administration, which has backed Guaido since he first challenged Mr. Maduro's authority more than 3 months ago, immediately came out in support of the opposition. Since January, Guaido has run what amounts to a parallel government, counting on support from more than 50 countries, but he's failed to depose or solve shortages of food, medicine, and power for Venezuela's 30 million people. So, yeah, and again, the sanctions, obviously, on Venezuela continue to be tougher. They're really trying to squeeze this guy's throat and really kick him in the stomach at the same time here and say, oh, well, maybe you should be able to let Venezuela breathe properly, but they're really the ones choking. The U.S. is here with these sanctions. But yeah, the starving stuff, it's awful to see. And the fact that you got Juan Guaido really pushing this violence and pushing this military, it just did not work. And I do want to get a little bit more into this because apparently after this coup attempt, Nicolas Maduro, he claimed his troops had foiled an attempt by the country's coup-mongering far right to usurp his administration and blamed President Trump for backing his adversaries. The Guardian reports, I truly believe the United States of America has never had a government as deranged as this one. Well, it's a little bit, it's possible. It's possible. During an hour-long national address Tuesday night following the opposition leader Juan Guaido's renewed efforts to oust him, leading to dozens of people being injured during protests in Caracas, Maduro called Guaido and his his followers America's useful idiots. I mean, he's definitely got a point there. America is getting literally exactly what they want out of these guys. That's probably why they're supporting them. And the Trump White House showed its support for Guaido on Tuesday following the release of the video in which Guaido announced that this was the final phase of the coup. If Cuban troops and militia do not immediately cease military and other operations for the purpose of causing death and destruction to the Constitution of Venezuela, a full and complete embargo, together with the highest level sanctions, will be placed on the island of Cuba. Hopefully, all Cuban soldiers will promptly and peacefully return to their island. So that is... It's obviously very disturbing stuff to see what happens. Obviously, hopefully the people, I mean, it's going to be rough for them, but hopefully the people get out of this all right. They don't deserve to have such a crazy government. That's for sure. Maduro, not a good guy either way. But the fact though what the U.S. doing should disturb anyone who's lived and seen and read history about what the U.S. can do to Latin American countries. All right. A very sad story in North Carolina. We're getting very few details about, but we'll get you everything we know. A man with a pistol fatally shot 2 people and wounded 4 others at a classroom in the UNC Charlotte on Tuesday. 3 of the wounded were in critical condition. The police took a suspect in custody, identifying him as Tristan Andrew Terrell. They declined to elaborate on a possible motive. So yeah, by the way, the shooting, it did occur on the last day of classes at UNC Charlotte, a public university with an enrollment of about 30,000. So yeah, all very interesting stuff. So about a quarter of the world's greenhouse gases are generated by humans, produced by the world's food system. That's raising, harvesting, processing, packaging, shipping, everything we consume. it's very possible. And if you really, it sucks, but if you really want to help the environment, the new research suggests like the way you could do it the best is by stop eating meat and methane gas products. So, it's all very interesting stuff. So, yeah, and if you want to ask the question, does what I eat have an effect on climate change? The answer is yes. The world's food system is responsible for, again, 1/4 of the planet-warming greenhouse gases that humans generate each year. That includes raising, harvesting all plants, animals, animal products we eat, such as beef, chicken, fish, milk, lentils, kale, corn, and more, as well as the processing, packaging, and shipping food to markets all over the world. So if you eat food, you're part of the problem. No, it's okay. Which foods have the largest impact? Meat and dairy, particularly from cows. So, yeah, the hamburgers. The average greenhouse gas impact in kilograms of CO2 of getting 50 grams of protein from beef is 17.7. Lamb, 9. This is in order the worst to the best. Beef, lamb, farmed shrimp, cheese, pork, farmed fish, poultry, eggs, milk, tofu, beans, and nuts. Yeah, so that's pretty much how that works. Not fun. All right. We, are going to now turn to quick hits. Quick hits, everybody. All right. Women have naturally elevated levels of testosterone can be barred from track races against other women, the highest court international sports rule today. Julian Assange has been sentenced as the British court sentenced a WikiLeaks founder to 50 weeks in jail today for jumping bail when he took refuge in Ecuador's embassy in London 7 years ago. The U.S. is seeking his extradition to face charges there. Hopefully that does not happen, just for the sake of journalism here. And yeah, this is going to be a tough charge to face. After a meeting with President Trump on Tuesday, Democrat congressional leaders said they agreed to pursue a $2 trillion project to upgrade highways, railroads, and bridges, and broadband. There's not yet a plan to pay for it. So, yeah, that is going to be an interesting thing to watch, possible bipartisan cooperation. Get something done in Washington. Social network Facebook introduced new features to encourage group-based chats as part of what it says is a shift towards private communications. The Federal Reserve is expected to leave rates unchanged today, despite President Trump's repeated calls for a cut. Federal Reserve going to Federal Reserve, as they say. Emperor Naruhito of Japan spoke after his accession to the throne in the Imperial Palace in Tokyo today. Naruhito succeeded his 85-year-old father, Akito, who abdicated a day earlier. Jussie Smollett, Fox said there's no plans for the actor's character to return to its hip-hop drama Empire, which had been renewed for a 6th season. Smollett was accused of faking a hate crime in January, but the charges were dropped. The sports media giant is limiting its money-losing print version of its namesake magazine, which debuted in 1998. That is ESPN, the magazine, so no body issue, everybody. Sorry about that. Jimmy Kimmel critiqued Joe Biden's campaign motto, "Make America Moral Again." But the thing is mama. So that's a little awkward. But, yeah, that is about it. But before we go, let's talk about May Day. Today is observed around the world as International Workers' Day. The date memorializes the conflict that became a critical moment in organized labor movement around the world. So, in 1886, the fourth day of national protests in the U.S. calling for an 8-hour workday, police officers responded with a homemade bomb in Chicago's Haymarket Square with gunfire. Within minutes, 7 officers and 4 protesters were dead. 8 labor organizers were arrested, tried, and convicted. Socialist and communist groups meeting in Paris a few days later chose to remember the Haymarket affair by making the date May 1st, May Day, a labor holiday, but U.S. politicians feared following suit, so it didn't really work out so well. The country eventually followed the lead of a handful of states in Canada, which had observed the holiday as for workers since early 1800s. The U.S. finally made Labor Day a holiday to be celebrated each year on the first Monday of September, celebrating the workers of the world. All right, that's interesting stuff. You just got the world. Speaking of the world, in 15 minutes exactly.